Hello, Bob Wells here, and welcome back to the Undercurrent Stories podcast. If you walk into a pub anywhere in the world, there's a good chance that you'll see a familiar name on a tap. But behind that name is a story most people don't know. One about family, power, responsibility, and the quiet decisions that shape generations. As Ned Guinness told me, it's the little things that matter in life. The small things become big things. Arthur Edward Guinness, the 4th Earl of Ivy, better known as Ned Guinness, is a direct descendant of the family behind the Guinness legacy and the current head of the Guinness family. He's also author of Guinness, the Family Succession. But this isn't really a story about beer, it's about inheritance, about navigating history during political turmoil and social change, about philanthropy, privilege, and the weight of carrying a famous name. In this episode, Ned shares personal family stories drawn from private archives, revealing the human side of a global brand and the choices that help shape both a company and a country. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories, Ned.
Thank you for having me, Robert.
We were just talking before the show about the fact that you are the head of the Guinness family, and your full name is Arthur Edward Guinness, but obviously you're Lord Ivy, but it is pronounced in different ways in different parts of the lands, isn't it?
That's right. Well, Ivor in the UK, Ivy up in the north of Ireland, where it actually comes from, where my family came from originally, and ivy like the plant in Dublin, which is where I was brought up.
Okay, so we've got a choice, but if I refer to you as Ned, I'm sure that'll be okay.
That's far easier.
Great. So
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much for coming on. I mean, it's been. I was really looking forward to having you on the podcast because we interviewed Adrian Tinniswood about his fabulous book, The Houses of Guinness. And it's been quite topical, really, because in the autumn we had the Netflix series, The Houses of Guinness, Adrian's book, The House of Guinness, I correct that. And then when I saw your book, the Guinness, A Family Succession, I thought, actually, now we're really going to hear it straight as it is. And the first sort of question I was going to ask, Ned, was what sort of sparked the idea of the story that you wanted to tell?
Well, I was brought up by a privately commissioned book, which is getting on for 70 years old, by my great-grandfather Rupert. And it was sort of, he assembled lots of family information from generations back, put it in one book, and it records the letters from family members to each other. It records lots of the account of Guinness of the day. And so I was brought up with that book, and it's been an inspiration, but only a few copies were ever published. And it was to celebrate the foundations of my family and what we were all about, to inform the next generations. And we're now like 2 generations on from that. So I thought it was about time to refresh.
It's a wonderful book. I read it just before Christmas, and having studied social and economic history from 1716 onwards for my A-level at school, it was very, very helpful in terms of understanding it from one company's perspective.
You know, it was a joy to look at it, because what I was trying to do was to obviously focus on the actual lives of the family members who were involved in brewing and their next of kin. And because so little has been said about what they actually were like, and and obviously information is limited, but having the access to the family archive, it really meant that I was able to get into the personal lives of these extraordinary people. And we were extraordinary because my father was the last of us, never say last, the latest of us to be a brewer. So that was 233 years of successive generations of brewing. So that's kind of eight generations in total. One was passive, but say 7 generations actively in brewing.
So I worked out that your I think it's 5 times great grandfather was the fellow who actually started the brewery off.
He's the man with a beautiful signature. I'm sorry, but the handwriting's gone downhill since his day. And that's the kind of registered copyright. It's on every can or bottle or label that you get as a registered trademark. That's right.
When you absorbed yourself into the writing of the book, did it feel like sort of uncovering history, or was it more like having a conversation with your ancestors? And also, just to add on to that, were there any particular characters that you grew to be very comfortable with?
Well, I think I did grow closer to the persons that I was researching. Reading the handwriting of individuals, very personal and private letters, and it did draw me closer. I had known a fair amount about about each generation before I started with the project. As I said, I was brought up with this amazing book that I kept rereading and reminding myself of, and it was really also the enablement of setting their lives in the kind of history of the day, to put into the perspective of Dublin, the much smaller place that it was, the mostly agricultural, the much poorer place than it was, and indeed the kind of political history that relates between Ireland and the UK. Obviously, Ireland gained its independence in the 1920s, so much of the book that I cover the period of is actually pre-independence. So whether Dublin had its parliament, and then it didn't have its parliament, and then there was, there's all sorts of political aspects of, navigating for business, for how it navigated those troubled or turbulent times. I suppose I didn't really have. I felt close to the various generations. I think the most significant one was my great-great-grandfather, also known as Edward or Ned, Edward Cecil Guinness, who was the first Lord Iver, who floated the company. I mean, I think I simply got closer to him and his wife Adelaide because so much more material is on them, really, as an extraordinarily significant couple.
I'd like to talk about your life growing up, Ned, if I may, and also at the point where you grew up and you suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I'm in a family that has travelled and gone through many generations of being a successful brewer, philanthropist, and went through the period of turbulent Irish history. When did you first realise that you were part of this family?
Well, my late dad, my late Papa Benjamin, he gave me much time and gave great care, and he had a great knowledge on the family history. So, and he was a bibliophile. Actually, he collected books, and he was a wonderful father. So, I suppose I was brought up with the family history, family stories coming from him. He was brought up by his Victorian grandfather Rupert. So, and we lived in the house that Benjamin had inherited from Rupert, which was built by the family, the generation above, Edward Cecil and Adelaide. It was their Dublin country house called Farmley, just outside the city then, which is now well incorporated into the city, the official guest state house. And so I was steeped in it really by both the location where I was brought up, the beautiful Farmley, which is immaculate to this day, and with my wonderful father and mother who and the team around us, because we had wonderful people, and obviously father's active life in the brewery, which was ongoing until the day he died.
And I have to ask this one, Ned. When did you first have a taste of Guinness?
Well, it was put in our christening fonts, each and every generation, as a little drop besides the holy water. So that wasn't exactly a taste, but certainly a kind of a touch to the skin at that point that I know of. And I think a little sip was permitted upon occasion. It grew me it was some time before I developed a love. So I was definitely teenage by the time I actually drank a pint. But Yes, I was initiated from a very early age.
For those listeners who really would like a very, very brief history of how the Guinness Brewery came to be, would you be able to explain that, please?
Sure. I'll try and do it briefly. So we started off the great, as you said, grandfather. The parents, that generation moved up to Dublin. They set up in a dilapidated brewery, which was by one of Dublin's medieval gates, which was where the pilgrims travelled to Spain, St James's Gate. And bit by bit, they invested in the brewery, and they invested in lots of children, 21 in total. They had long lives, productive ones. And little by little, the next generation, also called Arthur, then his son Benjamin came along, became the Lord Mayor of Dublin. It just got bigger and bigger as the generations went on. And then the two generations featuring in my book quite considerably, two brothers, Arthur, the oldest brother, and Edward Cecil, his youngest brother, my direct forebear. They inherited the brewery, and then Edward Cecil bought out Arthur to make it a public company in 1886. And so we kept on in a stewardship manner until, really 1992 when my father died. But it had changed significantly, and obviously it was a huge company. So with many breweries around the world, and 8-9 million at that point of glasses of Guinness being drunk and enjoyed around the world each day.
Do you still have anything to do with Diageo's Guinness?
I get up to all sorts of fun. I went to the various of us went to the Guinness Storehouse's 25th anniversary celebration late last year, a few weeks ago. And I'm trying to introduce Guinness Micro to the people of St Vincent and the Grenadines. So I'm really enjoying that. It's a delicious product, and Guinness is very popular throughout the Caribbean. And they just haven't had the privilege of having a Guinness Micro before, both in 0.0 form, the non-alcoholic version, and the full-strength version, the 4+%.
I have to say, I do enjoy Guinness, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly surprised when Guinness Zero came out on how much it tastes like the beer. I know there's a lot of, in my opinion, there's a lot of 0% beers that really don't taste as good, but this particular one I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'm so with you. You just have to drink it a little quicker because that head doesn't last as long as the alcoholic one. It's a marvel of technology, frankly. It's a credit to the company. They've introduced such a brilliant 0.0 version.
Yeah. Just on the philanthropy side of the Guinness story, I mean, in Adrian's book, he talks about it, and you obviously... It's there all the time. The amount of philanthropy and doing good as the company succeeded. I mean, that's quite something, isn't it?
Well, it is. In my book, I was able to highlight the effort that some wonderful Guinness women got up to, which doesn't get covered a lot, but they were supporting women who'd come out of prison, women who were facing destitution on the street. And retraining and reorienting lives, and that tradition continues. I'm privileged to be with the Ivy Trust in Dublin and area, the fastest growing social housing trust in the Dublin Leinster area, as we call it, around Dublin, and it's 130 years old, with a hostel for the homeless and with social housing communities around the city and the counties around Dublin. So it continues, and we're just about to start the commencement of the re-roofing of the Ivy Markets, which I'm proud to be associated with after about 30 years of disuse, right in the centre of town, and was designed to put a roof over the heads of street traders. And it was the heart and soul of the community till the 1990s, in that part of Dublin, between the two cathedrals. So there's been a wonderful history of philanthropy, and it still going on in some shape, in some significant shapes and forms.
Yeah. Did the housing element of it come out of the sort of ashes of the Guinness Trust?
Well, it was the Ivy Trust was in parallel to the Guinness Trust set up. A larger bequest was passed across, or sum of money. It was £200,000. It was a long time ago to form the Guinness Trust. The Ivy Trust was founded at a similar time, but with £50,000. And the Guinness Trust houses 125,000 people in England and Wales at this point in time. So an incredible thing, and obviously made so big by the central government, local government, Guinness Partnership, as it's now called, relationship and successive agreements, decade after decade. But nonetheless, it all started from great-great-grandfather's amazingly generous gift that gave people decent accommodation.
Just moving back to the book, Ned. It was always interesting that in every generation that took over the brewery, there seemed to be a leader, somebody who actually grabbed it by the horns and continued the growth of Guinness, despite the odd. I didn't really detect a huge amount of sibling rivalries. There were one or two, bits that you touch on, but it was amazing to see that there was always somebody at the helm.
Well, that there was, and we were lucky because we had long lives and they were healthy ones, and we seemed to just steer things straight. We had an awful lot of challenges. We almost moved to set up the brewery in North Wales due to the political settlement of the day. We had very narrow skirmishes. There was blockades of Guinness. There was all sorts of political challenges that we had. We were labelled as unfairly by certain competitors, and they could have got away with it. In terms of each one of these challenges could have been the death knell to the family business, but we held it all together, and I mean, I was really happy by my book, just sort of celebrating the little things. It's the little stories that were remarkable, and how it's the narrow things in life, the twists of fate, that actually, either they either make you or they break you, or at least break the business or make the business. And we had so many different kind of narrow escapes, if you like, and so on. So I hope my book is inspirational for people who make decisions, because we can all personalize our lives and just think, well, it doesn't matter if we do this or do that, but actually the little things become big things. So just keeping on the straight and narrow, and so I was really pleased to be able to highlight some of the small things that actually were huge.
Yes, there was one particular one which I'd love you to mention for listeners, very early on, where there was an issue with the water for the brewery.
That's right. Well, the Arthur Guinness stood over the watercourse that a Dublin corporation received. The city council of the day received about a quarter of its taxation money from the supply of water, and it was called pipe money. It was a tax. And the officials came to block up the watercourse leading into the brewery. And the Arthur Guinness of the day stood over the watercourse with an axe and told the council officials, about 5 of them, to go away with a string of expletives. And they did. But he had to fight. It was, I think, 9 years long, that legal dispute, because he'd bought the brewery with the right for free water. The city council had disputed that privilege, and obviously, what would be a brewery without the supply of water? It would have been not a brewery, but something a completely dry, non-productive type of a business. And anyway, he persevered and he won the battle. We continued to brew, and we continued to grow and prosper.
The social history aspect of it I found fascinating as well, during that, the turbulent times that Ireland's had. And I wonder if you could just share the bit about the aftermath of the famine.
Well, one of the extraordinary things we can think of now, but it was very much the case at the time. News travelled slowly, and even in Dublin, the news about the west of Ireland, particularly suffering from starvation, was slow to come through. And I was particularly, I suppose, sentimentally affected by seeing the words that we would answer the call with our purse, and I think the alleviation of some parts of parishes around the west of Ireland were really there was a very strong indication of intervention. But the decision makers had left the island of Ireland. Many of the key decision makers, who had been very powerful people, had moved across to the UK, and they had not heard the news, or maybe they had, but they were neglectful, one or the other, or a mixture of those two scenarios. And it was a disastrous time. So many people starved, or indeed were forced to emigrate. And we were there, but it was that vacuum of significant people living in Ireland in a position to support the destitution of the day that was in part the problem. And again, we have all this instantaneous communication, but they had word of mouth, letters, things travelling by carriage or by horseback, or and we can so easily forget. Actually, we need 3 meals a day, and if we don't have a food supply, well, we quite quickly run into ill health, frankly. So it was an extraordinary time, but we were able to do our bit.
How difficult do you think it was for the family and the business during extreme political events? I know, bombs and things going off in the 19th century, and also the religious aspect. I mean, the book sort of indicates that, I wouldn't say the Guinness family were treading a fine line, although they could have been, but they were a big employer in Dublin, obviously, so they were very important to the city and the welfare of everybody. How difficult was that dynamic, do you think?
Well, it became challenging in part, but I mean, I think what the most amazing thing about the company was, I think, how it treated its community, and I don't only mean employees, but the local community around central Dublin, where the brewery is still based, and how the good deeds that we made such an impact across a broad section of what was a much smaller place in those days. And so that those sort of waves of goodwill kind of it went backwards and forwards. So it protected us. But it was a challenge. Of course, political challenge turns into economic challenge from the angle of disruption to a business. We were labelled as we were always Protestant in our religion, and quite actively so. And there was an allegation that we were not fair on the workforce. We were sectarian about our way of treating the employees and treating people. But that actually wasn't the case, because the sheer inequality which we were highlighting as being wrong from a very, very earliest stage. And the problem was that there was an inequality of education. There was an inequality of, you couldn't own a property, you couldn't own a horse over a certain amount, you couldn't that if you were Catholic, if you were of not the preferred religion, you were discriminated against. And we were arguing on the inside of Protestantism, of mercantilism, of inverted commas, the establishment, as relatively minor establishment figures, we were saying, listen, we've got to change these things. We've got to make equality happen. We've got to, take the, people and kind of using meritocratic arguments, which now we think of as very modern and up to date. But in those days, I think there were incredibly strong resistances, so I think yes, there were challenges, and indeed the political settlement. If you look at the Scotch whisky industry relative to the Irish whisky industry, when Scotland remained within the Union and Ireland became ceased to be a member of the Commonwealth and became the Republic of Ireland, the discrimination on tariffs and things that were impacting the Irish whisky distillers were very strongly relative to the Scotch, which had the access to the empire. And obviously Britain was huge in those days with controlling so much of the economic world of the day. And but that was of huge impact. We had become an international brewer from the mid part of the 19th century. So internationalism we were, and we thought very strongly that Irish beer ought to be available to nations of the world, Caribbean included.
And do you think that realization of inequality is what inspired? Which one of your forebears was an MP, or was it? It was two, wasn't it?
Well, great-grandfather Rupert was an MP, and indeed, Benjamin, in the book, yes, Benjamin Lee Guinness was, he's my three greats grandfather, Benjamin Lee Guinness. He was an MP, and then, more recently we've had more MPs, funnily enough, in the Westminster Parliament. What was happening was that they all sat in Westminster. Westminster sat for 6 months. And then, of course, it took the best part of a week to get back to Dublin and to, get back to, grassroots and the brewing HQ. But we were very often encouraged to be MPs, and great-grandfather Edward Cecil, he was encouraged to be an MP, but he never became an MP. His brother was Arthur, who became an MP, they went on different paths. Arthur chose politics, and Edward Cecil took on the family brewing business to then make it a public company, to float it. So we've had a very strong sort of fling with politics, if you like. And then some of the wonderful women that we actually went up in the world on many occasions, marrying the Guinness wives that were married into, with great kind of families and dynasties that were far more significant than us Guinnesses of the day. And we were able to sort of obviously have an incredible world of connectivity through marriage, which I was very happy to highlight at the same time.
Yes.
As anything else. So the world of politics and the world of mercantilism, they kind of cross-relate.
Coming up to date, Ned, what are the Guinness family doing now? Well,
there are many, many hundreds of us. So we do pretty much everything you can possibly think of. We're not brewing. I do a little bit of brewing in where I live in Suffolk, in Elvedon in Suffolk, which is a lovely thing, at the Elvedon Beer. I have a couple of pubs, which is really lovely. One of them is the Guinness Arms, and the other one's called the Elvedon Inn. So I'm doing a little bit of relativity of work to what the forebears got up to. But we get up to all sorts of different things. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But we have an extraordinary family, but it's a huge family.
A little microbrewery you have, is it?
Yes, absolutely. There's a wonderful brewer called Brendan Moore who's uh, brewing beautiful beer and making incredible bread at the same time. And Brendan is a man of detail and a man of quality about his product. So we only brew a few bottles, and we sell them to the local marketplaces. And it's a lovely link with his history.
I have to ask this: are you brewing a stout?
We do brew a stout. Frankly, I'm loyal to the Elvedon stout, but I'm also very loyal to the Guinness beer and the Guinness stout. So I must say, I wouldn't be drinking. I do drink Guinness stout, but I would never drink other than at Elvedon. I would never drink anything other than a Guinness. Because I mean, it's a beautiful beer.
What would you like people who read the book to take away from it, Ned?
Well, I hope they take inspiration. I mean, I hope, like I say, it's the little things that matter in life. And yes, there's lots of luck, but it's also perseverance, stamina, good health, knowing who you know, and like good friends, the friend network, being true to yourself. I think there was an awful lot of those things, and then that thing of what you send out comes back. So just remember that, I try to remind myself about this. What you put out, you get back. So I think hopefully it's an inspiring read, and we're all like humans, just like everyone before of us, and everyone that's going to be coming next. So, and if you don't record history, it gets lost. And so I was really happy to record a little piece of Irish history and a little piece of family history and an era and the most amazing continuity. So they were pretty extraordinary people, but, they had a lot of luck and a lot of good health, and they did things. So yeah, I mean, it's something I'm quite proud. I'm quite proud of them and
Yes.
I didn't try and whitewash
No.
things. I just was trying to record what was really the case, and so I hope it's a book for posterity.
It's a very, very nice book to read, and I learnt a lot. What, if anybody's seen the Netflix program, which I think from a drama perspective was quite gripping. Obviously, there's things in there that happened that didn't happen in the book, and there's things in the book that didn't happen in the Netflix. What are your thoughts on the Netflix series?
Well, it's not a bad thing. I think it's good old gripping drama. And I think that, as you say, yes, based on fact or loosely based on fact, and it's a certain point in time. And obviously, the drama is very strong, and it's not as we were. We were there for the long haul. It wasn't just sort of like the thrills and spills, like as explained in Netflix. But it's good old gripping drama. And as my late dad said, if they're not talking about you, they're not thinking about you. And if they're not, and if the brand is, say it's a good book, or it's good beer, or it's a good legacy of works, or whatever. But so many things, they just disappear and dissipate. So I welcome it from the angle of profile. But I would dispute the stories that they've got in there, and I think some of the character depictions come over, and you might say unfairly, but nonetheless, it does its bit to focus on a period of history, and and it does no harm.
Did they make contact with you prior to releasing it or during it?
I had no association with the creators of Netflix. I knew that it was to be launched when it was, or at least not when it launched, but I had no connectivity to the creators. I knew of them, and indeed I strove to get my book out just prior to its launch, because I felt the primary sources where it was important to get the book out, not as a response to Netflix, but as like something that was there before Netflix, which I was just able to do.
Yes.
It was an incredibly rushed thing, but I haven't had to go back and change the book. But we got it out just before the Netflix launch last September.
Well, it's a great book, Ned, and it finishes, concludes sort of in the 1920s. Are there plans for another book?
Well, with a lot of people's goodwill, there may be another book, and it'll obviously be sort of different to what the first book is, Guinness: A Family Succession. It'll be a different book, but I would quite like, if I can get my hands on primary sources and a lot of goodwill from other people, I'd really love another book to come along. We'll have to. I know I'm in the early stages.
Oh, excellent. Well, this has been a great conversation, Ned. Thank you for coming on the show.
Robert, real treat to be with you, and thank you for having me.
That was Ned Guinness, author of Guinness: The Family Succession, sharing a story about family, memory, and quiet responsibility of legacy. If this conversation resonated with you, Ned's book explores these history in far greater depth, drawing on rare family letters and personal archives to bring the human side of the Guinness story to life. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with someone who appreciates history, storytelling, or the meaning behind a well-told story. So until next time, thank you again for listening to Undercurrent Stories, and we'll see you soon.